Tonight, we're going to talk about medieval knights, not the heroic, shining warriors from movies, but the real knights, because in reality, being a medieval knight was uncomfortable, exhausting, expensive, and often very disappointing. This is not a story of glory. This is a quiet, slow history about why it actually sucked to be a medieval knight. So relax, slow your breathing, and let's begin. Most people imagine knights choosing a life of adventure, but knights didn't choose this life. They were usually born into it. At the age of 7, a boy was sent away from home to become a page. This meant cleaning rooms, carrying messages, and serving adults all day. There were no swords, no battles, just chores and rules. At around 14, the boy became a squire. This was harder. He woke up early. He cleaned armor. He cared for horses. He followed a knight everywhere. Training was constant. Mistakes were punished. Comfort was rare. Sleep was short. This process lasted years, and after all that, there was still no guarantee he would ever become a knight. Already, it didn't sound very romantic. Let's talk about armor. Movies make armor look shiny and impressive. In reality, armor was heavy, very heavy. A full suit could weigh 25 to 30 kilograms. Knights wore it for hours. In summer, it became unbearably hot. Sweat collected inside the metal. Air barely moved. There was no air, no comfort padding. Rust was common. Metal pinched the skin. Bruisers were normal. Taking armor on and off took time. Going to the bathroom was a problem. And if you fell down, getting back up was slow and exhausting. Armor didn't make life easier. It made everything harder. Another myth. Knights were rich. Most were not. Armor was expensive. Weapons were expensive. Horses were extremely expensive. Many knights were always in debt. They had to pay for their own equipment. They had to maintain it. They had to replace it when damaged. If a knight lost his horse, it could ruin him financially. Some knights worked for lords who paid very little. Others worked for food and shelter only. Glory didn't pay bills, and being a poor knight meant stress, constant worry, and no security. Living in a castle sounds impressive. In reality, castles were cold, dark, and uncomfortable. Stone walls trapped cold air. Fires barely warmed large rooms. Beds were hard. Blankets were thin. Privacy didn't exist. Castles smelled of smoke, animals, and damp stone. Noise echoed everywhere. In winter, it was freezing. In summer, it was humid and unpleasant. Knights did not live in luxury. They endured discomfort daily. Knights didn't eat feasts every day. Most meals were repetitive. Bread, porridge, tis. Meat was not guaranteed. Vegetables were seasonal. Spices were rare and expensive. Food was often bland, sometimes stale. Fresh fruit was uncommon. Clean water wasn't always available. Hunger was normal. Eating was about survival, not enjoyment. Battles were rare. Most of war was waiting. Waiting in camps. Waiting for orders. Waiting for supplies. Knights spent weeks doing nothing, sleeping on the ground, enduring bad weather. When battles did happen, they were confusing and chaotic. Plans failed. Orders were unclear, and outcomes were unpredictable. Glory was rare. Fear was common. If a knight was injured, there were no modern doctors, no painkillers, no antibiotics. Even small wounds could become serious. Broken bones healed poorly. Infections were deadly. An injured knight often lost his career, sometimes his life. There was no safety net. Once you were no longer useful. You were forgotten. Knights lived under strict codes of honor. They were expected to be brave, loyal, obedient. Showing fear was shameful. Refusing orders was dangerous. Honor controlled behavior. Mistakes followed a knight forever. Reputation mattered more than comfort. Living up to expectations was exhausting. Knights didn't retire peacefully. There were no pensions. Older knights were often poor, physically broken, ignored. Many ended their lives in monasteries. Others depended on charity.com. The body paid the price. The legend faded, but the pain remained. Knights did not stay in one place for long. They traveled constantly, from one lord's land to another, from one conflict to the next, from one cold road to another. Travel was slow. Horses needed rest. Roads were muddy or broken or dangerous. Inns were rare. Shelter was uncertain. Many nights were spent outdoors, under rain, under wind, under uncomfortable silence. Travel was tiring, and there was no reward at the end of it. Just more orders and more waiting. A knight without a horse was almost useless, but horses were fragile. They needed food, water, care. If a horse became sick, the knight's entire future was at risk. Feeding a war horse was expensive. Transporting it was difficult. If a horse was injured in battle, there was little that could be done. Knights worried about their horses constantly, more than they worried about themselves. Sleep came with concern, not peace. Even after becoming a knight, training never ended. Weapons changed. Tactics changed. Enemies changed. Knights practiced daily, swinging swords, holding shields, enduring fatigue. Training caused injuries, bruises, strains. There were no rest days. The body slowly wore down. Strength faded, but expectations did not. Despite the danger, most of a knight's life was boring. Long hours of doing nothing, standing guard, watching walls, listening for sounds that never came. Days passed slowly. Conversation was limited. Entertainment was rare. Books were uncommon. Music was occasional. Time stretched endlessly. The mind wandered. Boredom settled in quietly and stayed. Knights followed commands. Questions were not encouraged. A lord said, "Go," and the knight went. Why didn't matter? Where didn't matter? Disobedience meant punishment or loss of favor. Knights had little control. Their lives were directed by others. Freedom was an illusion. Religion surrounded everything. Knights prayed often, before trefa, before battle, before sleep. They feared judgment. They feared punishment in the afterlife. Faith offered comfort, but also pressure. Every action felt watched. Guilt was common. Doubt was silent. Sleep was not always peaceful. Winter slowed everything. Cold stiffened joints. Mud swallowed boots. Snow delayed movement. Summer brought heat, sweat, fatigue. Armor never adapted. Clothing was limited. Weather controlled life. Comfort depended on luck. Years went by without notice. Young squires became tired knights. Strong bodies weakened slowly. Scars accumulated. Pain became familiar. There was no moment of achievement, no final reward. Just time moving forward without ceremony. And so another day began. The same armor, the same routines, the same expectations. Nothing dramatic, nothing heroic, just quiet endurance. And it continued day after day. year after year. When there was no war, life did not become easier. Knights still had duties. They guarded roads. They watched gates. They enforced rules made by others. Peacetime was repetitive, standing, waiting, observing. Days passed quietly. No excitement, no reward, just responsibility without purpose. Guard duty was slow. Hours spent standing still, eyes scanning empty landscapes. Most nights were silent. Cold wind, dark skies, heavy armor. Nothing happened. And when something did, it was usually minor. The mind drifted. Fatigue grew. Sleep came in short moments. Never fully. Knights often handled small conflicts. Arguments over land, disputes over animals, complaints between villagers. These were not heroic tasks. Listening, deciding, enforcing. People were rarely satisfied. Knights were blamed easily. Authority brought resentment. Respect faded quickly. Knights lived under strict discipline. Mistakes had consequences. Late arrival, lost equipment, disobedience. Punishment was public. Shame was effective. Fear maintained order. Comfort was not a concern. Armor demanded constant care. Cleaning, repairing straps, replacing damaged pieces. This work was slow, time-consuming, often done late at night. Neglect meant danger. Fatigue meant mistakes. The cycle never stopped. Swords were not magical. They dulled quickly. They chipped. They broke. Sharpening was routine. Carrying them was tiring. Weapons were burdens, not symbols of glory. Knights were often alone. Friendships were temporary. Assignments changed. People came and went. Trust was limited. Loneliness settled quietly. There was little emotional comfort. Celebrations were uncommon when they happened. They were brief. Strict rules remained. Behavior was watched. Freedom was limited. Enjoyment was restrained. Then life returned to normal. Illness was constant. Coughs, fevers, weakness. Medical knowledge was limited. Rest was rare. Recovery was uncertain. Many simply worked through sickness. Knights were replaceable. Younger men trained constantly. Strength mattered. Age was a weakness. Fear lingered. One injury, one mistake, and status vanished. Plans rarely stayed the same. A quiet day could turn busy. A journey could be canceled. Preparation wasted. Energy lost. Control was an illusion. Rain soaked everything. Mud slowed movement. Cold numbed hands. Heat drained strength. Weather dictated comfort, and weather was unforgiving. Straps broke. Buckles loosened. Armor shifted. Small failures mattered. Repairs were improvised. Reliability was uncertain. Sleep happened anywhere. On floors, on straw, on benches. Noise interrupted rest. Cold crept in. Dreams were short. Morning came quickly. Days blended together. No markers of progress. No milestones. Routine replaced. Meaning life became predictable and dull. Knights rarely spoke about fear or doubt. Silence was expected. Pressure accumulated. There was no release. Strength faded quietly. Reflexes slowed. Pain lingered longer. Yet expectations stayed the same. Time was unforgiving. New weapons appeared. New tactics emerged. Heavy armor became less useful. Nights felt outdated. Change came slowly. But inevitably, service rarely earned praise. Success was expected. Failure was punished. Effort went unnoticed. Motivation faded. Evenings passed quietly. Armor removed. Meals eaten. Silence returned. Thoughts wandered. Sleep approached slowly. Morning arrived again. The same routine. The same responsibilities. Nothing new. Nothing exciting. Just continuation. And so it continued. Not dramatically. Not heroically. Just steadily. Day after day. Year after year. Even after decades of experience, knights still trained daily. Swords were swung. Shields were lifted. Horses were mounted, and every motion repeated. Precision was expected. Mistakes brought mild punishment. Training never ended. It was endless and exhausting. Knights often patrolled large areas, walking long roads, observing villages, ensuring no crime occurred. Travel was slow. Feet were sore. Armor pressed against the skin. Sometimes nothing happened. Sometimes minor disputes arose. The days felt heavy. The nights heavier. Knights' lives revolved around their horses. Feeding, cleaning, brushing, saddles adjusted, reins checked, shoes nailed. A neglected horse meant trouble. A small mistake could ruin a patrol. Yet, this work repeated endlessly, without excitement, without end. Knights answered two lords. Commands arrived daily. Go here. Watch, sare, stand guard. Why? Often not explained. Orders were final. Disobedience meant shame. Life was dictated. Freedom was rare. Monotony persisted. Battles were uncommon. Knights often waited in forests, fields, or castles. Days passed slowly. Hours stretched endlessly. Nothing occurred. The mind wandered. Feet ached. Armor rusted quietly. When battles did occur, they were chaotic. But the waiting was far longer. Weather controlled a knight's life. Rain soaked clothing. Snow slowed horses. Wind chilled bones. Summer heat pressed down. Sweat mixed with leather. Armor became unbearable. Knights had no control. Endless discomfort persisted. Meals were simple and dull. Bread, cheese, occasionally meat, vegetables were seasonal. Spices rare. Meals were about survival, not taste. Eating became a routine chore. Sleep was limited. Stone floors, straw beds, cold rooms, noise and animals interrupted rest. The mind rarely rested fully. Another day awaited. Another repetitive cycle. Knights frequently got small injuries, cuts, bruises, sore muscles. Healing was slow. Doctors were rare. Pain lingered quietly. Yet life continued. No more pause. No relief. Strength declined gradually. Muscles stiffened. Joints ached. Reflexes slowed. Armor became harder to wear. Horses harder to ride. Expectations remained. Performance was expected. Monotony persisted. Younger squires arrived. Older knights aged. The cycle repeated. Life was predictable. Boredom never left. Knights maintained weapons. Horses armor. Walls gates. Daily chores consumed time. Adventure rarely came. Glory was uncommon, yet duties never ended. Long days encouraged quiet reflection. Thoughts wandered slowly. Memories faded. The mind relaxed and drifted. Monotony was almost meditative. Morning came quietly. Armor worn again. Breakfast eaten again. Patrols started again. No change, no excitement, only the slow passing of time. And the cycle continued. And so the day slowly came to an end. Armor was removed carefully. Weapons were cleaned and stored. Horses were fed and settled for the night. The castle grew quiet. The halls echoed softly with distant footsteps. Candles flickered in the dim rooms. Knights sat quietly. Some talked in low voices. Some stared into the fire. Some simply rested, letting the exhaustion settle in. No great victories to celebrate. No tales of glory. No songs sung loudly. Just the soft, persistent rhythm of life. The endless repetition. The quiet endurance. Outside, the wind whispered through the stone walls. The stars shone faintly above the quiet fields. Sleep arrived slowly, gently. The mind relaxed. The body sank into rest. Tomorrow would bring the same. Another day of armor. Another day of responsibility. Another day of waiting. And that was the life of a medieval knight. Not heroic, not glamorous, but real, quiet, unchanging. The world moved on outside the castle walls. Knights remained quietly enduring. And in that quiet, the story of their lives continued until sleep gently took over.